We're gonna talk about 7 main reasons or main things that absolute beginners or beginners in Blender struggle all the time, right? I've seen these questions all the time. So number 1 is going to be mode confusion, edit mode versus object mode. Then second one is going to be objects disappearing. So you model something and shit gets lost, right? And you don't know where it went to. 3, scale issues. So you run a bevel or you solidify something and things get distorted. 4, shading problems, bevels exploding, verts exploding, weird artifacts, all that, right? 5, modifier order, essential. Modifiers have to follow a specific order. If they don't, Hiroshima, okay? 6, Blender version confusion. I see this all the time. Like which Blender version I should be using, okay? We're gonna talk about it. And 7, topology fear. You see triangles, n-gons, and you run to your mom. Leave your mom alone, everything is fine. Let's talk about them from the top, yeah? So number 1, mode confusion, okay? There are 2 different modes in Blender. Edit mode and object mode. And by default, the first one you see gonna be object mode. It's here. You switch between them using tab. Don't worry about all this other nonsense. Forget about it, okay? 90% of menus in Blender are not fucking important. Put it in your skull, okay? People say, oh, Blender is so fucking confusing. It's not. You don't need it. You need just a very small part of it, okay? You're not gonna be doing everything in Blender. You're gonna be doing one specific thing in Blender, all right? So, focus on one thing, forget the rest. So, 2 modes, right? You switch between them using tab. So you press tab, edit mode, press tab, object mode, right? Now in object mode, you can move and manipulate with objects, as the name suggests. So you can move your cube, right? Duplicate your cube. You can rotate it, scale it, whatever, right? Now in edit mode, you can manipulate with verts. If you press 1 here, right? 2 for edges, and here 3, right, for faces, okay? So you can rotate your face, scale it, move it to whatever you want. The same with vertices, right? Or for example, edges. If I press 2 and Control B for bevel, that's what you can do. So you can manipulate with your objects in edit mode. You can edit them, right? Now where the confusion comes in. When you duplicate an object in object mode, you're gonna have 2 objects, 1, 2, right? But when you duplicate something from your object in edit mode, you are still in the same object. So if I press Shift D and duplicate it and right click to cancel, I'm gonna have 2 faces laying on top of another and it's gonna be one object. So if I go to object view, it's one object. So when I'm gonna run a bevel on top of this, right? So go here to generate and bevel. All right, you see the problem, okay? This is still part of the object, okay? So what you need to do is you need to go to edit mode, select the face and delete it in order to solve the issue. That's the difference. Another problem I see a lot of people are having is with booleans, okay? So let me just enable extension here, which is called bool tool. I think it's actually installed. Yeah, it's installed, fine. So I'm going to duplicate it, shift click here, right, and press Ctrl- on a keyboard, which is going to create a Boolean operation on this mesh, right? And now if I'm going to go to edit mode, you will see that my object is still showing the full cube. Why? Because this is a live modifier. Live meaning it's not applied. If I apply it, then I'm going to be able to create a real mesh, okay? See the distinction, right? When the modifier is live, this is just an illusion. I can still grab this shape and move it around. It's a live modifier. Therefore, if I go to edit mode, I can still grab an edge here and I can, for example, bevel it and do this, okay? So that's the difference, right? So, wrap your head around it, okay? These are the 2 main modes we're gonna be working on. And like I said, don't worry about the rest unless you're gonna be doing sculpting, okay? I've never used these. I just don't give a shit about them, okay? They're mostly for texturing and stuff. Second point, object disappearing. Now, why your stuff is disappearing in Blender, right? First, what you could have pressed is H, which is gonna hide things, right? So H. If you press Alt H, you can unhide it. So if you have certain things hidden, right, like these 2, press H, they're gonna disappear. So Alt H to unhide them. Another thing we might have pressed is the // which is a local view, okay? Now, if you press / again, you're gonna get out of the local view, kind of like an isolation view, right? So everything is visible, but you're isolating an object to work on it, okay? You understand? Third thing is when you press one of these eyeballs, they're going to disable visibility in a viewport as the tooltip suggests, right? So make sure this thing is on. Occasionally, you're gonna have this collection collapsed and one of these objects is gonna be turned off and it's like, okay, I see all the eyeballs turned on. What the hell is going on? Well, unroll this, right? And check, okay? And lastly, if you don't see stuff in render view, so you render something and you don't see something being rendered even though you see it in the viewport, is because you have one of these turned off, okay? This one will disable visibility in the render, right? So you can see this in a viewport, but you won't be able to see it in render. So for example, if you have a cutter, right? Cutter is by default gonna be disabled in render view, okay? So if I unroll this, you see that's a cutter, right? And it's disabled in render view, right? 3, scale not being applied. This one is actually quite interesting because when you press N to unroll this end panel and you scale something, let's say on the Z-axis, you see the Z-axis is gonna shift from 1 to a specific number. So a uniform scale is 1 by 1 by 1. That's a non-uniform scale. What does it mean? Well, for example, if I'm gonna try to generate a bevel on this, right? You will see that my bevel is gonna be kind of distorted. You see that? It's distorted. It's kind of flat. Watch what happens when I'm going to unify the scale by pressing Ctrl A and apply scale. Boom, right? Now it's nice and plump. So scale can affect solidification, erase, bevels, all kinds of things, right? So when you're working in vanilla Blender, you need to do this manually. Now, I'm usually working in Blender, we're using Hardops, Box Cutter, Machine Tools, Material Works, all the add-ons, Mesh Machine, because that's what intelligent people do. They work with add-ons, okay? So I want to show you the difference between this and, vanilla Blender and how actually add-on workflow improves the speed with which you're going to be working. And by the way, don't worry about this UI, it's just a custom color. So anyway, when you have a cube here and you're working with add-ons like Hardops and Box Cutter, let me just disable this end panel, auto end panel hiding. So when I'm going to scale this cube, right, and watch this, if I'm going to start to cut this cube with my box cutter, look what happens to the scale. Automatically it's going to get reset, right? You don't have to think about it. So this is one of the great advantages of working with add-ons, which is basically making things much easier, more streamlined, right? So going back here, that's the scale. Right, now next one, shading problems. This one is huge, okay? One of the most common shading problems is going to be overlapping topology. Now what is overlapping topology, right? If I add a bevel here and make it quite plump, and I'm going to create another cube, and I'm going to, let's just, scale this on y-axis and move it somewhere here, okay? Really close, right? And I'm gonna cut it with Ctrl minus. And I'm going to move my boolean above the bevel. So first boolean, then bevel. You'll see that if I turn off the clamp overlap on my bevel, I'm gonna have a fucking disaster. Why? Because my bevels are overlapping and kind of flipping itself, and the inner part of the geometry is coming out. So it's kind of like flipping a jacket. There's the inner part of a jacket and outer part of a jacket, right? Topology in Blender, or geometry in Blender, has two sides, right? So if I'm going to go here and go to edit mode, select this face, right, and I'm going to delete that, you'll see the inside's gonna be red. Red is bad, right? And red, when it gets flipped to the outside, you get this shitstorm, right? So the solution here will be to move this cutter until these two bevels here, you see on the left hand side, they don't overlap. Or what you could do is make this bevel smaller so it doesn't overlap here. See that? They just clash and flip under one another, and they literally, the guts of the cube spill outside. That's what's happening here, right? This is one of the most common issues with shading. Another problem with shading gonna be bent faces. Now, in order to understand bent faces, you need to understand topology. You have quads, you have triangles, and you have n-gons. Quads and n-gons can be bent. What I mean by that is that if I go to vert view here and I'm going to move this, you see that's a bent quad. So even though you have perfect quad topology, it doesn't mean that you will have no shading problems, okay? There's much more to this. This is why we don't teach quads to beginners, because it's too much of a complex subject. You need to first understand the tools, the workflow, and the basics of Blender, which is why, for example, our course, the Hard Surface Accelerator, teaches you exactly that, what you need, not what you don't need, what tools you need, how to use them, how to create and build an efficient workflow, and what to pay attention to in order to wrap your head around and don't be stressed. And then, once you're more versed in the basics, then you can dive into stuff like subdivision modeling, for which we have a separate course. But again, if you want to really master the basics, and even if you're intermediate, grab the Hard Surface Accelerator course, which is just phenomenal. It also includes the principles of design, which are going to help you not only to model in terms of using tools, but actually create better models by understanding the principles of design, okay? But anyway, long story short, polygons can be bent. Now triangles, right? Triangles cannot be bent, okay? So if I'm going to merge this at last and create a triangle, you see this one cannot be bent, which is one of the reasons why game engines use triangles. And also it's the smallest polygon, so it cannot be subdivided. If you subdivide a triangle, you're going to subdivide it into two triangles. No matter how you subdivide the triangle, you're always going to end up with triangles, okay? Do you see what I mean? So that's the smallest polygon. So quads and n-gons can be bent. So what does it mean in practice? Well, if you grab a cube and you're going to, bevel this one, right? Like here, okay? And create a large bevel. And we're going to create another cube. And we're going to scale this, right, and move it somewhere here. Let me just move it here and here. And I'm going to move it somewhere here, right? And I'm going to also add bevel to this cube, right? So I'm going to add a bevel here. It's going to be a little bit distorted, but it's fine. See, the scale wasn't applied. Look what happened. You see this bevel is not uniform. I'll watch this. If I apply scale and then do the same thing, boom, see the difference? So that's, again, scale issue, right? So I'm going to cut this, right? And when I'm going to right click and, add auto smooth to introduce, smoothness to this cube. So basically smooth all these surfaces, right? You see how nasty kind of shading we're getting here, all these pools and lines. That's because these polygons, which became basically n-gons, because when I apply this mesh, right, apply this boolean, I'm gonna get n-gons, right? They get bent. They're just simply too large, okay? So they get bent, which is why you get shading problems. And in order to fix this, you simply need denser topology. That's one solution, right? Another thing that may happen a lot with modeling in Blender, and I'm gonna actually show this to you on this here because it's quicker. I'm gonna be using add-ons. So when you're gonna grab a cube and run a bevel on it, right? And then you're gonna run a cut on it, you see this kind of a nasty shading problem here? That's caused by Blender trying to adjust normals. Now normals, if you want to understand normals, go ahead and watch Josh's video. Josh is the other half of Blender Bros. He's a mathematician. He is a perfect explanation of normals. This is the only video you're gonna ever need. So what Blender is trying to do here is trying to average the shading between the curvature of the bevel and the flatness of the faces. So you need to help him a little bit by adding another modifier, which is called weighted normal modifier, and you can find it in here, okay? And this modifier should be always at the bottom of the stack. Now the problem with vanilla Blender is that for some fucked up reason, someone decided to pin this modifier. Someone decided to pin the auto smooth modifier, and you need to unpin it. So watch this. If I add a bevel here and I'm going to, adjust the segments, and I'm going to right click and shade auto smooth, which is going to add smooth by angle modifier, which is pinned. So now when I'm going to add, you see weighted normal modifier on top of it is going to be always above. Right? And this is going to cause problems when you start running booleans. So you always want this modifier to be on the bottom of the stack, okay? That's really important, right? So you want to, see that? You want to unpin this nonsense here. First of all, we're going to bring this boolean to the top, okay? Secondly, we want to unpin this and move it above. You see the difference? Look at the difference, look. See what I mean? I don't know which fucking moron decided to pin this shit. That's retarded. This is why we work with add-ons which don't fucking do it. This is a smooth by angle added by hard-ups and box cutter automatically when you add a bevel. So when I add a bevel, I have to think about it, right? I just add a bevel and my smooth by angle is here, boom. In addition, all the modifiers are being sorted automatically, right? That's the same operation I performed here, then it took me 5 minutes in here. Do you see what I mean? So you want to eventually move to add-ons. In addition to all this, what you want to do, see this nasty corner? You want to go to bevel, go to geometry and switch this nonsense to arc, which is going to curve your inner bevels, right, in inner corners to a nice kind of a round, round bevel. And that's how you should be working with your modifiers. And now it's really important moving to the next point, which is modifier order. As you may have noticed here, it's not important, it's fucking essential. So if you're gonna move this bevel on top of boolean, this is gonna happen. Why? Because you first bevel everything and then you boolean it. It just doesn't make any bloody sense. You wanna do it in order, right? You first wanna boolean and then you wanna run bevel on all the cats. You see what I mean? The same with, for example, mirrors, right? If I apply mirror here to this mesh, right? And move this mirror above boolean, the boolean will not get mirrored because first you boolean, then you mirror, right? So if I'm gonna go here and add a mirror, so now I need to bisect it and flip it, and I'm gonna move it. You see these distortions? It's all caused by the modifier order. I need to move it above smooth by angle. Now if I'm gonna move it above the boolean, it will not mirror the boolean because first I'm mirroring, then I'm booleaning. Okay, see what I mean? So this is why you need to think about it all the time when you're modeling. And it's really annoying. Whereas when you're using add-ons, this shit happens behind the scenes. You just mirror and you're done. And even if you boolean something, you're gonna get mirrored automatically because hard-ups will sort out booleans automatically, right? And you can see it here on the workflow. All these modifiers are auto-sorted. The same with box cutter, okay? This is why we use add-ons. The same for example, for flipping between modes. In vanilla Blender, you need to do this retarded dance, tab 1, 2, 3. Who the fuck has time for this shit? What you want to do, mate, is you want to grab yourself the machine tools and, here, when you switch between modes, it's just, tab, and I move my mouse to the edge, face, vertex, right? So that's edge mode, face mode, vert mode. It's so quick, do you see what I mean? So when I want to edge, I do this, I bevel, and I switch to object mode. It's just so quick. It's a muscle memory eventually, but it's just much more fast, and you don't have to waste your time on this manual bullshit, right? So learn the basics in vanilla Blender, but once you do, fuck off and get your add-ons, right? Because seriously, tempo's fugitive. All right, next one, 6. Blender version confusion, right? It doesn't fucking matter what Blender you're using, right? You can be running 5.0 courses in Blender 2.8, and I'm serious. The only 3 things that change that actually make any difference is auto smooth, modifier menu, and extensions. The rest is literally the same. Now they recently added a new array modifier, which is good, but other than this, honestly, nothing really changed, right? So it doesn't really matter what version you're using. And just to illustrate you that, I'm not just saying this, I mean that I have all these versions running on my computer from 3.6 to 5.0. And by the way, 5.0 is shit. I'm not using it. I'm using 4.4.3. That's the version that I'm using all the time when I'm modeling. This is the most stable version, that I know of, okay? Now, the differences between these versions are really small. Like, for example, I told you Auto Smooth. In Blender 4.4, Auto Smooth, which is this smooth by angle, wasn't a modifier. It was just simply something you applied to mesh. So you right-click on the mesh, you shade Auto Smooth, and it was applied to that mesh. It wasn't a modifier, okay? That's the difference. Then the modifier menu was just one massive menu instead of these retarded sub-menus, which are fucking annoying because I have to look for shit right now. Do you know what I mean? And the last change that's actually could affect anything was this one. We just had add-ons. Now we got extensions, which are Blender native add-ons and add-ons. But even with this one, it's not it's not consistent because, for example, Node Wrangler, which is an extension that comes with Blender. Now it's on the add-ons, so it's fucking confusing, right? I don't know why they did that. Don't ask me, but it is what it is. In essence, you don't really have to worry about Blender versions at all. In fact, find yourself a Blender version that's stable and fucking keep it. In addition, my pro tip for you is gonna be make a folder, put an exe file of this version in that folder, and put all the add-ons that actually work flawlessly with that version in that folder. So you're gonna have a package that you can install on any PC anytime you want. And just like Windows, they occasionally come up with a pokey like Windows 2000 or Windows Vista, whatever. You want to run a different Windows, do you know what I mean? So that's with Blender the same thing. I'm not using 5.0 even if my fucking life depended on it, because it's shit. It's crashing on me all the time. I don't like it. I'm working in 4.4 and I couldn't give two shits what other tools 5.0 comes with. I don't care because I'm using add-ons, right? So I'm using it for stability, okay? 4.4.3 is very stable, never crashes on me, and I love it. And 5.0 just is, it's still buggy, okay? So until they fix it, I'm not using it. So again, use any version you want. It doesn't fucking matter, okay? And last one, topology fear. At the beginning, focus on learning the tools, the menus, the basic workflow. Forget the topology. It doesn't matter, okay? As long as your shading is fine, you're good. You can worry about topology later. We have game asset courses with n-gons. We have all kinds of courses with n-gons. It doesn't really matter, because what you need to do first is learn how it all works, right? Like I said, the workflow, the menus, the tools. And once you master that, then you can worry about more complex subjects, like, for example, subdivision surface modeling, for which we also have a course. But it's for more advanced students who know Blender but want to learn subdivision surface modeling. In fact, this course is one of the most add-on heavy courses we ever produced, because when I was recording it, I wanted to teach the most efficient and effective and fast subdivision surface modeling workflow, because that shit is annoying on its own, right? You don't want to make it more painful, do you see what I mean? So I'm using probably about 10 add-ons. So it's not beginner friendly, it's, subdivision surface beginner friendly, right? But if you're beginner in Blender, forget the fucking topology, focus on the basics, and just, turn off the noise. Don't listen to retards who tell you you should be model everything in quads. They're fucking retarded, okay? Don't listen to this, it's just noise. Yes, subdivision surface modeling is still important for topology sometimes, for, animations, for VFX, etc. So if you need it for a specific reason, then yes, you should be, you should be learning it, but there's a time and, and place for everything. And when you're starting with Blender, it's not a good idea to, take everything on board and just, learn everything at once. It's just too fucking much. It's system overload, okay? So learn the basics first, learn the tools, learn the workflow, then you can worry about topology, okay? And that's about it. So these are all the 7 issues that, all the beginners are struggling with. I hope this video is going to help you a lot. Like I said, if you really want to learn this as efficiently as possible without making any stupid mistakes and learning bad habits, grab our course, the Hard Surface Accelerator, which is just phenomenal. We have probably close to 6,000 students in the course right now, and they absolutely love it. And once you go through the course, you will understand the basics. You will build very good foundations to do anything you want in Blender, right? Whether it's sculpting, subdivision, whatever the fuck you want, it's just gonna give you very, very solid basics, right? The link to the course is in the video description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.